Dear, welcome to the Raj and Pablo Show. As you can see, I'm flying solo today. There's no Raj
It's
on the
just
plane.
Pablo today.
It's just the Pablo and Dear show. How's that? Um, so, you know what? It's going to be World Earth Day on the 22nd of April. So we thought if there's one person we should be speaking to, it's you, given your role as a goodwill ambassador with the UN about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. How is all that going with you?
It's it's a privilege, Pablo, because one, of course, is to be able to champion for the earth and champion for the cause of the earth is important. It's urgent. It's necessary. I think all of us have the ability to do so. And not just in terms of advocacy, but just the things that we do in our everyday lives, the choices we're making, right? Given that we are confronted by a triple planetary crisis of climate change, of pollution, of
Yeah.
biodiversity loss, and this is threatening, the extinction of the human species. But that will happen later if
If,
we allow it to happen. But the problem is that right now, in this hot minute, we are killing so many species by just the way we do business or the way we live.
let me ask you, because I remember talking to you when you first got appointed the ambassador. And I'm saying this
That
from
was when I was
experience.
appointed the UNEP ambassador, the
Yeah, well,
environment
yeah.
program.
Um,
Yeah.
and the reason I'm asking you is that during the lockdown, I decided to do a master's, and a lot of my master's was about sustainable development goals. And there was a lot of things that I did not know. And just reading about it and having to study it, it changed me. So when this, in terms of your growth and what you've understood about what's going on around us, has it kind of changed your perception about a lot of things?
Oh, of course, because knowledge and awareness leads to personal determination and action. If I was oblivious to the statistics, the science, the data that is now more accessible than perhaps ever before, then I wouldn't be conducting my life the way I do. I wouldn't be making the choices that I do. I wouldn't. And also, Pablo, I feel like, you can only be a good advocate when you implement change at a personal level. And if it is for the SDGs or it is for the environment, they both work in tandem. I don't believe any of the goals are achievable if we don't act on climate. And everything is driven really by climate action. Um, I know better now than I perhaps ever did before. Having access to the United Nations and the programs they lead, the campaigns they lead, and most importantly and most significantly is access to the science brings about a serious
Mm.
amount of understanding and awareness. So it can be very overwhelming, I'll be honest. There are days when I read, whether it was even like the recent IPCC report. It's a comprehensive report, it's intense. There's a lot of hard facts there. But what is inspiring is that even though it shares with us the enormity of the situation, what it also helps us understand is that there's solutions that exist. And I think
Mm.
that for me is the most significant takeaway from the work that I do. Because if I didn't have access to the solutions, I would be a hot mess.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
apart from, like making the differences in your own life, because you have become so much more aware, what does your role entail? Do you go and talk to quite a lot of people? Are you?
Pablo, I mean, as an advocate, I would just as the name suggests, your immediate work is to spread the information, is to
Mm.
help educate people. So I use the full extent of my social media presence to do that. I use every opportunity I get to engage with audiences, whether it is citizen groups or it is corporations or it is NGOs or schools or colleges. Even through the lockdown, we did so many sessions online where we were talking and engaging. So the idea really is to take that science, understand it, and make it my own, and then deliver it and make it accessible to people, and accessible in a way where they can implement everyday actions, bring about lifestyle changes.
And like you rightly said, climate change, I mean, it affects a lot of other sustainable development goals. I mean, how do you think given that we had COP26, I mean, India was there and there was a lot said about India not committing quicker than they should, and, you know, a lot of toing and froing, but how do you think we are generally as society, do you think we're making progress?
It's a hard
It's a huge question, right?
it's a rock and a hard place. It's a tough question to answer simply, but I okay, so I'll give you try and share three short perspectives. The first is that India is the third biggest emitter of greenhouse gases, right? 7.3% is what India is emitting in this time. And that's a problem. Now, what is also unfortunately a problem is the fact that it will take time for India to go away from fossil fuels and shift to renewables completely. There is a lot of effort being made to do so. I know our Prime Minister has made serious commitments on the amount of solar energy we will produce in the next 10 years, and the numbers are big. Now, the other problem to achieve those numbers and to achieve that transfer to clean energy is a lack of funds. So unless and until the parts of the world that did make the commitment to fund developing nations like India, of course, there are many people who question the fact that we still call ourselves a developing economy.
Yeah.
But the truth is that there is a significant population that is still dependent on that money coming into the country for us to be able to make that shift. The third point is I see a tremendous change in people's behaviors and attitudes, especially amidst those who have, in some way or in some form or the other, been able to make more informed choices. There is a significant shift in young people who have access to education. The number of student groups in the country and the kind of communities they're building to learn, to educate, and to, of course, mobilize action towards climate action is tremendous. I'll give you a small example.
Mm-hmm.
The Environmental Act there were certain amendments that were made by the MOFCC in India, and they floated the draft online. This was during the lockdown. Over 2 lakh young people wrote into the ministry, and this was unprecedented participation by young people to question, and not just question the amendments, but to point out how those amendments would empower crony capitalists, how it would continue to cause further devastation and destruction of biodiversity and lead to significant loss, and how in many ways it would disempower local communities and, of course, the environment and all the laws that are protecting nature in the country right now. So that was a big pushback, and I think it really made the ministry rethink some of the choices they were making, and that's one example. But 75% is the number, the percentage of increase that we saw in participation from the youth on environmental issues, especially online.
I think that there has been a big movement with the youth. I mean, we saw it during COP26 here in Scotland, and just recently the UK have announced
COP26 for me, Pablo. I mean, while you know what was happening indoors was a big disappointment, but what was happening outside was so energizing. Because you saw so many young people, so many people mobilizing action, so many innovators, solution seekers, thinkers. I know that there are so many young people, even in the UK right now, who are engaging with the governments, who are demanding that new fossil fuels do not get sanctioned, that more you don't continue to buy more, invest in fossil fuel. And that's really been the ask from the UN.
Well, I know here in the UK, it's just been announced this week, actually, that there is actually now going to be a subject taught at GCSE with O level that is just called climate change. So
Yeah.
it is essential for the youth to start learning. I think that's a step in the right direction because,
Absolutely.
like you said, education.
It's everything. They're going to be leading governments. They're going to be forming policy. They're going to be doing everything they can. But the good thing is that they're not waiting to get there. They're
Yeah.
taking a seat at the table right now because, we keep talking about how young the next generation is going to inherit the earth. But I'm sorry, they're born into it already. They're currently breathing toxic air. They're currently eating toxic food. They're currently dealing with the
I mean,
unprecedented
we've
change in
seen
climate.
what the weather changes, the floods, the fires in the States. I mean, we're actually
Everywhere,
living it now.
everywhere. We live it now. So we cannot talk about climate change as a matter in the future. I think Greta Thunberg made it really clear
Mm.
when she said that the house is burning right now. We need to fix the problem right now. We
And
can't wait.
can I ask you what if you could? I mean, obviously, enough is never enough in a situation like this. But what saddens you? What really saddens you about this whole situation? Or what do you
There's
find
so many
frustrating?
people who still refuse to accept that climate change is man-made.
Mm.
They just refuse to acknowledge the fact that in just the last 100 years we've caused all the problems that exist. um, and I think, and a refusal to acknowledge that climate change is man-made is one of the big reasons why we're refusing to change our behaviors. We're refusing to change our patterns of consumption. But sometimes, like for example, I was watching an interview recently where a scientist was talking about how he's very optimistic because uh, I think those who need to really understand the urgency of creating the shift that we need
Mm.
is beginning to happen. So there is a growing amount of interest and, of course, investment in renewables and all kinds of technological solutions. Some of them can backfire, but I think a vast majority of them can make a big difference. So I think when economists stepped in and showed people who were driven by greed that, working with nature and
Mm.
nature-based solutions can help you make money while these solutions protect the planet and help save lives.
And I think you're right in saying that because the businesses can make a change. And I mean, even if we talk about the film industry, there's something called Albert here that BAFTA run that's about shooting sustainably in terms
Yeah.
of how much energy we use, our carbon footprint,
How much
and there's also about scripts, how to write scripts so that you can use them to educate people, where you can bring in climate change. So I think you're absolutely right. It's got to come from where the shifts are made economically to say we
Yeah.
will invest in you, but you've got to do your part for the planet, because I think we have a responsibility to future generations just on a
Yeah,
humane level.
even for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I don't want my old age to be like, spent in temperature levels that hit 50 degrees centigrade and I can't do anything about it.
Well, you know what? You're doing great stuff at the moment. I want to say thank you very much and carry on going. We're so proud of you.
Thank you, Pablo. I was
Thank you
pleased
so
that
much.
Raj. I missed meeting him today and I hope to see you both soon.
I will. Thank you.
Ruckus Avenue Radio.